Welcome to the Elder Hour, your new favorite way to end a workday. I'm obviously not Matt, but I'm with regular co host Jocelyn, as Matt is on vacation and Rona is out today. So, the Elder Hour is part of the Purple Acorn, and we're out here feeding squirrels all day, every day. Is that the saying every week? I like that. I've never actually heard it. So,
No, you know what, Serge? I think Alan wrote that just for you because I haven't heard that before.
well, it's a pleasure being on the show. Obviously, I can't replace Matt or Rona, but some would say, I don't know if it's true, that I'm way better looking than Matt, but I guess we'll let the audience judge that. Not that it makes a difference, but
No
Jocelyn,
comment. No comment.
no comment. Jocelyn, it's really a pleasure joining with you. And I had the fortunate pleasure of spending almost a week with you last week at Sherm. But before we dive into Sherm, there's a couple things that I do want to cover. So everyone needs to check out purpleacornnetwork.com after the show because you need to check it out. We're on LinkedIn. We're almost to 2,000 followers. So let's set a goal that we should hit 3,000 followers before the end of July. And there is a ton of podcasts on the Purple Acorn network. There's a ton coming down the pipeline too, like the industry influencers that we've been able to sign up to the Purple Acorn network is going to blow everyone away. But particular, the Elder Hour, go check it out. It's available on Spotify, Apple, and everywhere else you find your podcasts. So, Jocelyn, we were at Sherm. Then it was July 4th, and I saw some pictures of you being around Chicago. Is that right? How was your July 4th holiday?
That's right. July 4th was awesome. I was actually in Chicago for my sister-in-law's 10th wedding anniversary party. It was a really big deal for them, and we were just so happy to celebrate with family and with so many friends who we got to meet for the first time, which was amazing. And then we did a little bit of sightseeing. So I did this really cool. I think I might have. I did. I sent a picture to you and a couple other friends of us on this boat called First Lady, and it is a sightseeing tour on the river that's focused on the architecture of Chicago, which was really cool.
You know, I've done that tour. I've done exactly that tour. And here's a mistake that I did because sometimes being from Canada, I assume that it's always nice everywhere in the US, right? Even though Chicago is pretty much like in Canada, if you look at the border. And we did it in October. It was so cold. So I have to experience this in the summer because it was really cool, but obviously nicer weather. But looking at your pictures, I was so impressed learning about the Chicago fire, which I had no clue about. But anything really impress you, Jocelyn?
Yes, I think there was this one building to account for the swaying from the wind, since it's the windy city. They actually had these gigantic pools on the top of the building, and the water would somehow stabilize the building when it was moving back and forth, and it could move up to 3 feet in
Oh,
any
wow.
direction at a time and be fine.
Oh, wow. Anywhere else in Chicago you went to? Did you catch a baseball game? Obviously, you're probably really busy with this celebration, but anything else just struck you, was interesting?
Uh, you know, um, it's interesting because I'm from the DC area and have lived in or around DC for most of my life, and it's an incredible city. It's one of my favorites. I love DC. What was very interesting to me about Chicago was how incredibly embracing the city is of the Pride
Mm.
community. And so we had an opportunity to spend a lot of time in, whether it was looking at art or whether it was eating really good food, whatever it is, there was like this community that was incredibly welcoming. And as wonderful as DC is, it just doesn't have a community like that. And I thought that that was incredibly impressionable when we were there.
No, really cool. And I've seen that before, right? Like it is a very inclusive city, and most cities, most major cities in the U.S. are in Canada as well. So it's always good to see that. But last week, we were in a different city. We were in beautiful San Diego, and my first ever SHRM. I'm going to assume, Jocelyn, you've been to SHRM many times. So, first of all, what was your impression of SHRM 25 in San Diego, and how did it compare to past ones that you've attended?
Yeah, so I think I've been to maybe 5 or 6 SHRM
Ooh.
annual conferences, I think in a row, maybe since 2020 or, no, that wouldn't make sense, 2021, so I think 5. And, I've always found them to be wonderful, unique in their own ways, each one a little different, some of it because of the impacts of COVID, of course,
Yeah,
the ones earlier on there weren't as many people there. I would say there also weren't as many sessions. It was just, and then the following year, Sherm was just trying to get used to, okay, like how many people are we actually going to have? How much space do we need in a hallway? How much space do we need in a session room? How much lunch do we need to order? I think there was kind of like a little bit of just getting back into the swing of things again. I thought the show this year was really excellent, and there were a few things that were really impressionable to me. First, as always, they had a really great speaker lineup.
yes.
Having Joe Biden at the end was super cool, and I'm really bummed that I was not able to make his speech because I had to take a flight out. Um, but just incredible to have speakers come in and really provide some influence and inspiration to the HR community that we can take away and go back to our workplaces and try and inject in a positive fashion. So I thought that was really incredible. The other thing that I thought was maybe a little different this year than perhaps previous years, and I loved this part, is that before, with AI, I think there was a lot of conceptual information around AI,
Yeah.
or hey, here are these AI products that have come out that could be useful to us, or perhaps a use case of a company that utilized an AI product and it did X, Y, and Z for them. But I felt like there wasn't anything truly practical about AI. And something that I've kind of been very passionate about is just the fact that HR really, for the most part, and again, I'm generalizing here, doesn't really get the education they need to be technologically savvy as strategic leaders in a business. So I loved it. There was actually, I wrote it down. There was one session, it was called Beyond Prompts 5 Ways to Build a Human Relationship with AI. I don't know if you caught that session. It was in the
I did
career
not.
section. It was really good. And what I loved about it so much was the practical takeaways that, whether it's an HR associate or a CHRO, practical takeaways that one can go back to their workplace with and try and instill in some fashion. But also just I've really loved that there was this educational piece that HR could take away from a tech perspective that would help them be a bit more tech literate when they're having discussions with
Mm.
other leaders at their organization, or they just want to upskill for the next jump in their career. So I thought that was wonderful.
Do you know what I found with AI, particularly in this situation, that was different from conference in the past? Like, this was my first SHRM, but I've been to so many HR conference over the years, and it's all these vendors talking about AI, but they're not talking about what problem they're trying to solve. And I saw a little bit of a shift with a lot of these companies, and even in sessions, talking about like, here are the problems and here is how AI can potentially help solve these problems, which is a really dramatic shift from 2 years ago, going to Unleash and HR Tech and those types of shows. So I was really happy to see that. I had a couple of highlights. I thought there was some great, I think there was some great conversations or great vendors. Like, it was a little overwhelming for me because I'm like, being going to all the other conferences, I've never seen this scale. I think there was ended up being around 20,000 people, and most of them were practitioners, which was really cool in itself. The other thing that kind of shocked me was, so Johnny Taylor, who's the CEO of Sherm, I've seen him, right? Like, I know who he is. But I'm walking through like the floor, the expo floor, and I see this massive commotion, and I see really big bodyguards around someone. I'm like, oh, is this like Joe Biden? Is this Jason Sudeikis that was there? Is this the Toby from The Office? Like, do they need bodyguards? No, it was a gaggle, I'll call it, of people around Johnny Taylor trying to get pictures. I don't know if autographs, but like he is like an A-lister when it comes to the HR community, which was really cool. But I did meet the A-lister and I took a picture with the Aflac duck. That was really the highlight for me of the whole show. No, I'm kidding. But I thought just the scope of how many people were there and how many vendors and how many sessions and the keynote speakers, like you mentioned, were fantastic. Did you go see Josh Groban? I don't think you did, right? Like,
I didn't know. It was actually my birthday, so I was with you during the Josh
that's right.
Groban
That was that
end
night.
of it. Yeah, it was. No, I missed it. And you know what? I would have gone, except when you're an exhibitor, you only get one conference pass, so
Yeah.
you only get one ticket to that Tuesday night show, and I wasn't gonna go and leave the team behind.
Well, okay, here's the thing too. I got offered to go. And I generally don't pass up on concerts. I love live music. But I wanted to hang out with the crew, including you. It was your birthday. The other thing is I heard he sings a lot of Broadway show tunes, which I know one song. Literally, I know one Josh Groban song, which is a fantastic song. But the thought of Broadway musicals to me is like probably the most painful experience that I could ever live. And our producer is like big time in Broadway. He's
Yeah,
probably cringing
you won't
to
be invited back again.
no, he's probably cringing, but it's the one thing that I can't stand is Broadway musicals. So I guess I did miss out though. I did talk to a lot of folks that went and really enjoyed it. I also quite enjoyed watching Johnny Taylor's speech. I think his message was really clear. I know he's a controversial person in the HR community right now, but I thought what he talked about made a lot of sense. But I don't know if did you see or hear about Johnny Taylor's speech?
Neither. No, I didn't. Were there any takeaways from the speech that you felt were compelling?
Yeah, there was a couple things that really hit me is the engagement of the younger generation in the workforce. The stats that they showed were really damning, right? Like so from 15 to 24, the participation rate of 15 to 24 in the workforce is at 50%, which is a 10% drop even from 2021. How are we like we need this generation in the workforce to be highly engaged at this particular time. We need them to be working. I think a productive society is everyone's working. I understand the challenges as well. And on the flip side is the older generation. So I hate to say older because I'm getting really close to that age, but talking about 50 and above, that they're looking for a lot more flexibility. They want to work later. So when they get to 55, 60, 65, someone will want to work, maybe not full time, but just that flexibility to help mentor for 10, 20 hours a week, which
Mhm.
I'm looking at both sides of the equation. And I'm like, there's a happy medium here. Like we need to engage the younger generation. We need to engage the older generation. I think what they're both saying very clear is we need a ton of flexibility. So I think the HR professionals, the business leaders that were in audience, I hope that really struck a chord. The other thing I heard or saw was the eagle. So the whole purpose of it was having an eagle to rise above the fray, right? So they had an eagle in the back of the room that was supposed to fly from the back of the room to the front of the room. Unfortunately, he just hovered around the room, which an eagle flying over your head can be a little bit scary. And they were trying to coax him down. He ended up like landing back to the original place he came, but I thought it was funny. It was always entertaining having a live eagle within a conference room. Pretty risky, but pretty cool in some ways.
I did see that eagle in the expo hall actually, and I didn't know it
Did
was
you?
that. So you've solved a mystery for me.
I did. Okay, there you go. But what else is on your plate? What else is really piquing your interest right now?
Well, I did an interview while I was at Sherm Annual, and for the life of me, there were so many conversations and they were all
Mhm.
wonderful, but I can't remember who it was I was speaking to about this. But we were talking about, why states are taking it upon themselves to change or pass these laws and pass them so quickly, or what feels like very quickly or frequently might be the better word. And there were some kind of key areas that the states were getting more involved with. One was minimum wage, which you can imagine and appreciate because the federal minimum wage is absurd.
Absurd.
So we've got that not just at the state level, but also city and county level as well. So those differ and they're changing all the time. And then we have like leave laws, for example, and a lot of them are focused around things like family leave, but we're looking at more ancillary leave. Like, for example, California has their school literacy leave law, which, among many things, allows you to take time off. It's protected leave, unpaid, but protected leave to go on a field trip with your kid or conferences with the teachers. There are now other states that are looking at similar types of leave like that. So I think we're going to see more of that coming up. And then also, paid family leave insurance is becoming more and more popular across the states as well. But something that comes up time and time again, and it's at a federal level and it's at a state level, and I think it changes more at the federal level, or there's just so much talk about it that it
Mhm.
feels like it's changing all the time, is around classification. So, should a role be exempt or non exempt, or an employee versus a contractor? And I think that that's something that really inspired a situation that was particularly interesting to us. So I thought, Serge, we could go into the situation room and have a quick conversation about that.
Love it. Let's do it.
All right. So I'd love to just briefly summarize this situation that happened. It's an HR manager who's posted. I'm going to look down for a second as I read through this. But basically, it's an employee who was misclassified as exempt when they should have been non exempt. They were classified improperly, but they were consistently working about 35 hours per week. So there was no risk of back pay for overtime. Employee isn't happy about this. They want to stay exempt. They don't want to be non exempt. You see this happening a lot, in part, if anything, just because there's some type of status in one's head about the difference between being exempt versus non exempt. Non exempt, typically, you see more kind of hourly, blue collar roles. And so there are some folks that really would prefer to be exempt, although, of course, nobody can just choose what they'd like to be, which is part of the problem here. The other complication in all of this is that the salary was based off an expected 45-hour work week, not 40 hours. So the employee is now arguing that the conversion should be based on 40-hour work week, which would significantly increase their new hourly rate. Uh, I struggle with this part because if it is an exempt role, it shouldn't matter whether they're working 40 or 45 or 35 hours. It should be the same salary no matter what. So that part was a little confusing to me, but I see this happen a lot where an employee prefers to be exempt or non exempt, or perhaps there's an individual who prefers to be an employee versus an independent contractor. And it's so critical for HR professionals to appreciate the fact that, as much as we might like to classify an individual one way, or that individual would like to be classified another way, we can't just decide, right? We have to go through a classification audit, like an ABC test, depending on what state you're in, for example, and determine whether or not this role is truly exempt or non-exempt. And there are a lot of categories that go into that composition of whether one is exempt or non-exempt. And it's something that employers need to take very seriously, because what we generally tend to see is one of the top reasons why an employer gets sued and successfully sued is because they've misclassified individuals, regardless of whether or not that person wanted to be classified a certain way. So, a sticky situation for that HR manager. Really, all you can do in that situation is go back. They've looked at the overtime. Do we have to pay any back pay in overtime? We also want to take a look at benefits as well. Make sure that they're at least making a minimum wage in their work jurisdiction or higher, of course, and then taking a look at the benefits to make sure there's no disparity between what an exempt employee versus a non-exempt employee might be making, and if there is some type of gap, ensuring that you very quickly resolve that from a compensatory perspective. So that's the situation.
So, looking at the Reddit post, which this is where it originated from, this original poster got the comments were not nice to her, and I think it really related to, okay, so you're going to tell this employee that they're going to make 20% less based on the hours as you described it, and potentially a change in their benefits, which creates a lot of uncertainty for that particular employee, right? When something like this changes, or even though it's like an error, like in this particular case, this error shouldn't be on the employee, right? Should be on the employer. Like how does it work in the US?
Yeah. So in this case, and I'm sorry because I misspoke earlier about the salary versus hourly conversion. So just to speak to that really quickly,
Yeah.
if this individual has consistently been working in the mid 30s, like 35 hours a week, if I wanted to be really safe as an HR professional, I would recalculate that salary to be a 35-hour a week hourly rate to
Okay.
be super safe. That's what I would do.
Yeah.
If I, just to be really safe because it can cost you a whole lot more later on down the line. Um, it's hard having these conversations, especially when benefits change. And I do believe that, yes, if the employer misclassified, they should be responsible for the compensation lost. And if they go to court, they would be responsible for the compensation lost on behalf of the employee. So they absolutely want to resolve that as quickly as possible. So I don't know how it is in other countries, Serge, or what it's like in Canada, or if you have any insight into what it's like in Canada. But here in the US, that's something that an employer is definitely responsible for.
Yeah, it would be the same, and I guess it really depends on, similar to states, there is different laws in different province, and it's the same, I'm going to assume, in most European countries. At the end of the day, I think the critical part here is, if this is a good employee, I think you have to be fair. I think you have to have those open, honest conversation about what happened and how to rectify it. Like a little bit of empathy here, because anytime that you're making any changes to any employer employee agreement, it creates a certain level of stress, anxiety. I know it does for me, and I'm going to assume that's pretty normal for everyone. But like at the end of the day, a mistake's a mistake. You just have to figure out and move forward, right? I know here in Canada is really interesting because there's a lot of, I guess, misunderstanding of what is exempt and what is non-exempt. There's a lot of roles that you would make the assumption that it is non-exempt, which is a challenge because employers can take advantage of that with certain roles, being like, hey, no, it's non-exempt. You should be working 55, 60 hours a week. So I'm never a fan of salary for most roles unless it's management, like pure management, and obviously the salary is at a level that it makes sense and there's a lot to do. But again, I think it all goes to empathy. Doing the right thing for the employee is always going to look good for you, because reading Reddit posts that say anything negative, it doesn't mention employer or anything like that. But your employment brand is so critical because it's what the perception of working at your company is from internal and external people. So just get it right, right? Own up to your mistake if you need to, and fix it.
Yep. And as you said, fairness is key and communication is crucial. So don't go to the employee and say that they're misclassified until you have a plan of action.
Yes, that's a very good point. Don't don't jump the gun until you know exactly what that conversation is going to look like. So, completely agree. Really good points. Appreciate the decision point. That's what it's called, right? The segment. Did I screw it up? What was it called?
Uh, Points and pints.
No, that's the next. But what was that segment called? Uh, the situation. Anyway, let's move on to points and pints. And do you have a drink?
I do actually, first time ever. I have the Surfside black cherry lemonade and vodka. I will admit it's still a little early for me, Serge. It's only 3:30 in the afternoon, so I will. I know it's a little early for you as well, so maybe we can enjoy just a couple sips together, give a good review on the drink, and and then set it aside until 5 o'clock.
Yeah, so I have Kokanee, which is a local beer brewery in Vancouver, or not in the Kokanee Mountains, so in British Columbia. Same. It's actually noon here, so I have to be really careful. I have some meetings this afternoon, but we'll take a couple of sips and go from there. But I do want to drive into our first topic when it comes to points and pints, and it's based on an employee benefit linked to financial stress that's becoming more popular than 401ks. I'll give you the key points here. So, 73% of workers are living paycheck to paycheck. I think we're all seeing that. The main cause of financial stress is 55% are citing rising housing costs. If anyone has looked for an apartment or looked for housing in the last 4 to 5 years, are all living that reality. 41% blame it on the increased price of essentials. Been to the grocery store lately? Yeah, it's a little, as a family of five, it's gone up considerably since the pandemic. And 34% say salaries have not kept up with inflation. And if we really dig deep on the data, I think that is reality, especially talking about minimum wage earlier in the conversation, which, by the way, is insane what it is in the US. I'm not going to be like it's better anywhere in the world, but like the average, I think the last time it was changed, I think you mentioned, was 2009. And just imagine what's changed since 2009. So, how are employers responding to this financial stress? So, companies are increasingly turning on to on-demand pay platform as a solution. So, these types of tools allow employees to access earned wages before the standard bi-weekly cycle. Some really prominent companies have been doing this. So, Target, Hilton, McDonald's, and HCA Healthcare. There is a bunch of companies out there. There is a local one here where I am in Calgary, Canada, that I want to shout out. It's called Zayzoon, which actually launched in the US for a couple of years, and now they're actually moving into Canada, their home base. Couple things they've noticed. So within weeks, 50% of employees were using the app, including salaried workers. Turnover dropped by 25% among those using the benefits. Generally, how it works. So there was Zayzoon as a platform. There's also a company called Daily Pay, TapCheck, FlexWage, and CloudPay. Um, and basically, what they do is they charge you instant pay access for a $3.49 fee. Next day pay access is free. So there is no cost for employers. Integrates easily with pretty much all the HR systems from what I've seen, and empowers employees to manage urgent needs without using payday loans. And I'll tell you, I've used the payday loan very early in my career, and those are real. When we talk about shark loans, those are shark loans and should be banned, in my opinion. So, for many people, I see this as a really viable alternative to payday loans. And as coming from the talent acquisition space, I think it's a really attractive benefit when it comes to attracting people, especially I would say in high volume roles, but pretty much every role in that case. What's your thoughts here, Jocelyn? When you initially look at this, it's becoming very, very popular as probably the most popular benefit right now and that's offered by employers.
Yeah, I'd definitely say it's popular among kind of the those high volume blue collar roles for sure. I would say that if we're looking at financial benefits, I would argue, and this is off of no data except my own opinion, so take it for what it's worth. I would argue that there's still probably more of an emphasis that would be placed on 401k match. Um,
Yes.
but earned wage access like is what's there to help you with your day to day, and that's really critical. So for those companies out there like Target, like Kroger, like HCA Healthcare that are going to have kind of more of that blue collar workforce that can't wait, 2 weeks or even 1 week, perhaps, because as we've said, 73% of Americans, not just blue collar workers, but people period are living paycheck to paycheck right now. So if there's a way to get them access to their wages sooner at a really nominal fee and the employer doesn't even have to pay for it, it just seems like a no-brainer, unless it's something that simply wouldn't be valuable to your workforce. Because you do have to keep in mind, of course, that when you're integrating a new tool like this, that's a huge lift for an HR
It
department.
is.
So don't implement it for the sake of it. Make sure it's something that your workforce would actually find valuable.
Do you have any concerns with it? Is there anything that kind of is maybe a little bit of a red flag? And like, I'll guide you a little bit where my head is going. There's something to say about the ability to spend within what you make to manage your budget accordingly, especially when we look generation just coming into the workforce, right? Like, I think we're all in that situation when we're out of college and now we're making a little bit of money and maybe we're spending a little too much. And I'm not saying this is the case, but I think it's a valid argument to bring. Is this going to create habits and expectations that will not help them in the long run if they know they can always easily access how much their daily wage? I have some concerns about it. Overall, I'm on board, but I think it has to come with some type of financial education. And I think, especially for new entry level people coming into the workforce, that this is something employers can support them with. I know that sounds weird, but we don't teach it in school.
Right. No, it's true. And we absolutely should. It's interesting because I implemented one of these early wage access programs at a company that I was with a few years ago. And that was a concern that I'd had as well. Are people going to treat this like a credit card that they can't
Yeah.
pay back? And there are a couple of things. The first is, they need to pay it back on that next paycheck. So it does happen pretty quick. Whether you get paid weekly or biweekly, you're going to have to pay that back pretty quick. So there's kind of that in mind. But actually, the company that we ended up using, and won't say names, just they were awesome, but won't talk about who they are. Just that they're a big player in the space and they're very good. Had said they'd provided a lot of statistics to us during the sales process. And one of them was, and I just can't remember because it's been a while now, but the amount of money, average amount of money that an employee is taking out for early wage, and it's something nominal, $100 or less, and they're not pulling their entire paycheck out
Mm,
to pay for a cruise. They're pulling out $100 to pay for their Verizon bill. So that's not to say that everybody is doing that, but the majority are.
yeah.
Um, and and I think that's great. What I also saw from this vendor was that they did provide a lot of financial education and were super huge on financial wellness. So for them, it was not in any way a priority for the employee to just take out as much money as possible. If anything, it's that they pay them back, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so there's a lot of education that goes into it. But you're so right. The younger generation that might not have gotten that education in school will need, I think, that extra support from HR or from their managers as they're being introduced to a benefit like this to make sure that they're being healthy with the financial choices they're making.
So the $100 coincides perfectly what the article says. So the average withdrawal has been around $85 to $90, which kind of just offers enough to relieve that financial stress, pay your phone bill, pay maybe get a little bit of food. I'm just hoping this is not used to DoorDash every day or Uber Eats or whatever the equivalent is. I don't think that's the case, but I do as we're talking about candidate attraction, how do you differentiate yourself from different employers? How do you get people to stay at your company? I think this is a great retention and attraction tool overall. And I think we're going to see a lot more of it. They did earn that wage, right? Like they did work those hours. So I'm on board, but again, it's always with a little bit of caution. And there's going always going to be the outlier of someone that uses it maybe the way that they shouldn't. But this is where financial literacy will be extremely important.
Yeah, and I do think one other thing for HR practitioners to consider before implementing a solution like this is to really speak with the provider about what happens in the event that somebody terminates and you're in a state where you have to pay final pay same day, for example, or the next day. How does that work if they still owe money back? Like, there are plenty of states that don't allow you to withdraw from somebody's paycheck without their written approval for that specific transaction. So I know that these early wage access companies have a solution for it. Can't remember what it is, but it's definitely worth calling out.
I agree. Thanks for calling that out. It makes a lot of sense. I never thought about what the implications would be if someone is terminated or they leave within the same day. But perfect. Let's jump into the next points and pints. Do you want to highlight the article, or I can as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. So, hyper personalization in the workplace. It's interesting because I do think that we had um, a conversation on this show in the last couple weeks about personalizing the experience for the Gen Z workforce. And so, this is just kind of like a reinforcement, right, to this messaging. And it's and actually, it's so funny. I was just about to say it's not a trend. It says right here, it's not just an HR trend. Oh, I remember. It was when we were talking about companies in India taking this hyper personalized approach to the Gen Z workforce. So it's everything from the experience you get in the recruitment and the onboarding process, all the way to termination, and you know what, even post termination as well. Uh, how you personalize that individual journey, that individual experience for each employee is a really strong strategic move for attracting, engaging, and retaining your Gen Z workforce. However, I'd like to point out that this actually isn't just Gen Z, right? This article talks a lot about don't just because in HR you'd create personas for your workforce and kind of categorize them into different areas based on their generation or their or their education or their family status or whatever it is. And maybe somebody who has a family cares more about X benefit than somebody who's single, for example. And that's how you can start targeting in a really kind of more organized fashion the way that you personalize the experience for each employee. But now what we're going to see is technology coming out that is automating that process for HR in a lot of ways, which I'm super excited about. I think it's going to be really incredible as we see more and more of this being introduced. But the idea here is that we're taking a look at data. We're taking a look at different aspects of the employee life cycle and figuring out how we personalize for them. So not just Gen Z anymore, because guess what? Gen X has a completely different set of motivators and things that they appreciate that also have to be personalized as well. It's just going to perhaps be different. So it'll be quite interesting to see how HR engages with these types of technologies to better improve the experience for every generation across the workforce, and not just generation, but kind of where each place is at, what their values are, what their career aspirations are. And I think it will give employers an opportunity to keep people engaged and in seat longer as they help them develop in their career more.
I so it goes exactly to what we were talking with the prior topic, where basically earn wage access and 401k match, and I also talk about like benefits, right? Like someone coming into the workforce is probably more considerate or looking at, say, pet benefits because they don't have kids yet. So hyper personalizing the experience for employees, I think, is absolutely critical, and it's going to be a game changer a lot of ways. Here is where I'm a little bit nervous, because you mentioned a lot of it is going to be automated, and I'm just worried that we're going to make it a little too creepy. I see it in marketing, right? I think that's a perfect example where you're seeing ads that are hyper targeted to something that, say, maybe you search, or even some case that you've talked about in your household. I'm not saying this is the same, right? But like to kind of give you that thought of like, why do you know so much? Like, why is it so personalized to me? Maybe it's because the generation I come from, I'm Gen X, where maybe like I don't trust the system. I don't trust everything that's going out there. And it feels like you have way too much information on me, that you're hyper personalizing everything. Am I just being paranoid? Should I remove the tinfoil hat? I think I'm a little worried about that.
No, I think that's totally fair. What I would expect or hope for anyway is that there'd be some type of opt out option, right? There's an opt out option. That's great, employer A, that you want to do this, but I don't want you having my data. I don't want you looking at my search history on my work computer and seeing that I really like looking up flights to Bermuda. And so you get me travel stuff. Like, that's nice that you're getting me travel stuff, but it's a little creepy, right? I totally get that. So I think if there's some version of an opt out function, it could still allow HR to cater to people who are interested in being involved.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I believe in hyper personalization, because like we're all individuals, and I think in some ways when you go into workforce, you kind of lose that individualism. But in saying that, it's just like there's a line. We just got to be really careful, and this is where technology can go a little bit too far, and this is where, how do you match the human element to technology, and how does really you look at, you don't want to be treated as, this is really targeted to you or hyper personalized without really a person behind it, and that's just the way I think about it. But overall, I agree. I think this is going in the right way, because I think we all want to be individuals in the workforce, and we want to bring ourselves to the workforce. So love it.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see. But it's a big challenge for HR, right?
I'd say so, right? But it's cool too because the HR profession is becoming more and more dynamic as technology comes out to supplement what we're doing, improve it, bolster it, what have you. So it's really exciting, and I can imagine that as the software does come out, we'd even be able to choose how invasive do we want it to be, right?
Yeah.
So I think we'll even get that feature.
Perfect. All right. Well, Matt's on vacation, but he can really never take some time off. I'm assuming he's on vacation because he's going to be at RecFest UK this week. But he did take the time to do an interview with a legend in the industry, Mr. Master Burnett. Actually, I had to look that up. Yes, he is a legend. I know him. So let's jump into that interview.
Hi everyone, I'm currently on holiday, so we pre-recorded this a few days ago because I really, really wanted to have this conversation and bring it to you in the live show. So delighted to be talking to our next guest. Hi Master, how are you doing? And welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to this conversation.
Fantastic. So for people who might not know you, can you just introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Sure. My name is Master Burnett. I am currently leading growth for a company called Hyper-Brain, based here in the US. I have been in the recruiting and talent advisory space for probably the last, it's embarrassing to say now, 25 years. I'm not sure where the first 20 went. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it has been that long. I've had a distinct opportunity to work with a wide variety of organizations around the world in a number of countries. and I'm just really passionate about how organizations put people together to make things happen.
Yeah, fantastic. It's I know what you mean. I don't know quite where the last 20 years have gone. And I certainly don't know where the last 5 years have gone. It appears to be just come some kind of massive blur of disruption. And I suppose on that point, I mean, this is such a fascinating time in TA, in work, in talent at the moment. What are you seeing? What's most surprising you? What are the sort of the biggest changes that you're sort of observing in the market at the moment?
This is just a really chaotic time in the market. I don't think we've ever had this much external force applied to the talent acquisition function within an organization in quite some time. At least in the last 25 years, it streaks out. Not only do we have just the massive and evolution of artificial intelligence within the workforce, we've also just got tremendously chaotic macroeconomic climate. And those two things are coming together at a time that are just driving tremendous change, not only in how organizations put their workforce together, but how they look at workforce flexibility, how they look at evolving strategy on a much faster time frame. So chaos. It's chaos, Matt.
It certainly is chaos. And tell us a little bit more about how you're seeing organizations responding, because I know that you're a keen observer of sort of large progressive employers. What are some of the things that are happening, that they're doing to try and deal with this fast change and this kind of real uncertainty that's out there?
We see it going two directions. Manager self-service was, I remember it early in my career, popped up and very quickly faded away with regards to recruitment, because it typically meant just large-scale, uncoordinated use of external agencies and ballooning cost. But you fast forward to today, and we are seeing organizations, particular organizations with a higher volume workforce, looking at manager self-service and replacing talent acquisition functions with tooling to support that effort. That's one direction we see going, and I wouldn't say that that's the majority of what we see happening. I think the other direction we see happening is the evolution from talent acquisition to talent advisor. And there's a lot of things that fall under that talent advisor title. We're seeing talent acquisition absorb more responsibility for talent planning, helping managers think through what is the right labor type, what is the right structure for this role, what skills are being replaced by AI or could be replaced by AI, or how do we use alternative labor types in this particular area. We're seeing internal mobility. We're seeing talent acquisition take on responsibility for early career development inside organizations. So that transition from talent acquisition to talent advisor is probably the one that is most exciting to me. Yeah. And it's the one we see happening in the greatest number of professional hiring environments.
No, absolutely. And you've got a really interesting, your company's got such an interesting product in that kind of area in terms of sort of hiring manager enablement and intelligence and all that kind of stuff. Just give us a quick overview of what it does so we can kind of contextualize that a little bit.
When I first encountered HireBrain, I'll be honest, when I looked at the website, I had no idea what HireBrain was doing. I was introduced to our founder, David Nason, by another colleague. And when he said that if we just had a conversation, the two of us would get along quite well. And so we set up a conversation, and I learned a little bit about what HireBrain was doing, and I was enamored from that start. Hiring has a strategy problem. Always has a strategy problem. Even in the most progressive organizations, we set hiring strategy when we hire a TA leader. We build all the technology function around it. We build our approaches and our methodologies. And the business could change its business strategy 15 times in the course of that tenure. Yeah. Hiring function is not going to change. We've always relied upon, the talent acquisition function has always relied upon the hiring manager to translate business strategy into hiring need. But if you look back and you think about it, how often do the structure of job descriptions change over the course of a TA leader's time? They don't.
Mm.
There's very little translation of business strategy into talent strategy in even the most progressive organizations. And so when we look at how we're bringing people into the organization, it's not aligned with
Mm.
corporate strategy. In many cases, we are not starting with the role or what needs to be accomplished in an organization. We're starting with a generic set of responsibilities, aspirational responsibilities at that, and we're putting people characteristics around what we want to see in a role, not what we need accomplished. And
Yeah. Mm.
so I think it's no surprise that the vast majority of new hires in an organization will tell you 6 month post hire that the work they're actually doing bears little resemblance to the role that was advertised to them or that they were even assessed for during the interview process.
Yeah, yeah, that I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that from that kind of job description onwards, there is that massive disconnect. It's like use the job description we used last time, or whatever it is. It's just that it's almost kind of like we'll get the right person in, and then we'll think about the strategy, sort of sort of approach, isn't it? And I think the most exciting thing is that AI technology can change this. And I think that you're using an interesting kind of combination of AI, but also other things like, neuroscience and, behavioral stuff, aren't you?
Great. I never actually answered your last question as to what HireBrain is. I got off onto the problem that HireBrain was addressing. HireBrain is using a combination of tools and approaches to help hiring managers and recruiters solve that strategy problem, to better align hiring to business strategy and to drive impact in the business in a way that is easily recognizable to all of the stakeholders involved. And we do it using AI plays a big role in what HireBrain does. Not AI the singular. I think any organization that tells you their solution is an AI really doesn't have an idea as to what they're actually enabling or transacting. HireBrain uses a combination of small language models that are designed for specific actions throughout the hiring process. We do use large language models largely for their generative language capabilities or for language refinement. And then we use AI also to drive automation and coordination throughout the process. So at its core, HireBrain is about helping hiring managers better articulate what needs to be accomplished in a role over the course of the next 12 to 18 months and aligning the rest of not only the hiring cycle. When I started with HireBrain, we were largely focused just on the hiring cycle. But today, HireBrain is being deployed pre-hiring cycle. We're helping hiring managers craft justifications for hire.
Yeah.
We're helping workforce planning functions better articulate talent shifts within the organization. We are helping post-hire. We're driving onboarding plans based on what needs to be accomplished and how the organization needed to down level hiring. So today, HireBrain is playing a role outside of the hiring cycle, but our core technology is really focused on better articulating what needs to be accomplished and aligning the rest of the talent function to that objective.
And I think that's fascinating because we often talk about the role that AI plays and the role that humans play in the hiring process. And there's always this there's always kind of debate about, well, actually, what is it that humans are better than machines at, and all this sort of thing. And I think a lot of recruiters would say that actually, hiring manager intake meetings, teasing the right information out of the hiring manager is, a skill that they have and something that technology could never do better. But you come at it from a very different angle, where actually technology is doing things that humans can't do in that context, isn't it?
It is true. So HireBrain has a very clear philosophy on the application of AI within the organization. We are not about displacing the talent acquisition function at all. HireBrain is laser focused on augmenting the talent acquisition function, and we're doing it in such a way that we want to up level, augment, and automate the things that drive the most value or that matter most to producing a business impact. And so when we talk about the role of the human, even in the best best context, the large language models, which the vast majority of talent solutions are based on, their training data wasn't fit for purpose to begin with.
Yeah.
And so if you take a large set of mediocre, slightly related data, you train the large language model on it, at best, you're going to get the mean of mediocrity coming out of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you're going to get average. And so when we talk about the role of the human in the talent acquisition process, the human discernment, all of the unsaid information, the uncaptured information, all of that organizational knowledge that doesn't exist in the models, that's really what we rely upon the recruiter and the hiring manager to leverage in driving this process and making it more than the average of average or mean. It's really about making the best possible outcome specific to an organization. And that's one area where HireBrain is truly unique. We are what we call context aware. So I mentioned we use a lot of small language models. We use large language models, but we also have a filter and wrap strategy that sit between all of them, where we take organizational strategy information, we take organizational branding information, we take information about the personas of the players in the organization, and HireBrain has access to all of that context. So even if we have two customers that are looking at using HireBrain for the same core challenge, what HireBrain will produce for organization A will be different than what we produce for organization B, because our models are all context aware.
I think that's just fascinating, and I think also that the kind of like, automation and augmentation, I just think it's really interesting, because it's almost like the augmentation of today is the automation of tomorrow as the technology moves. And I think that's going to be I think that could be like a problem for our industry to get its head around, because this is a shifting thing, and the barriers are moving continually.
It is continuing to shift. If I told you our product lifecycle was 6 months, I would be lying. It's probably even shorter than that now.
Wow.
It just continues to evolve at a pace that it literally does keep you awake at night. But what you highlighted there is augmentation. The augmentation of today is the automation of tomorrow. And I look back at what we are doing today, how we are augmenting people today, and it's not rocket science. What we're doing today in terms of augmentation is all the labor that a talent acquisition function would have been doing 35, 40 years ago, that due to capacity challenges, we've just cut out.
Yeah.
It would have been, before we created a job description, there would have been a role design effort conducted in an organization. There would have been job analysis conducted. And that job analysis would have been repeated every time we wanted to execute that role. We don't do that anymore. Organizations don't have the capability or capacity to do that anymore. We would have created a hiring plan and a hiring strategy, and part of that hiring plan would have been to create a very specific screening assessment for the role that was role specific, to build out an interview guide. How are we going to conduct this interview? What are the questions we're going to ask? That doesn't happen anymore. Instead, we improvise our way through the process in most cases. If we do have an interview guide, it's a peanut butter interview guide. We've got this bank of 120 questions that we pull from, and hiring managers ask the same things over and over, or they just completely deviate from the guide and go from their gut with whatever managed to piss them off the day before that's still top of mind. That's how it's actually being done. The vast majority of the process is being improvised in terms of its human execution.
Yeah.
Yes, talent acquisition technology has made all of the mundane data movement from application to application. That we've done that to death. What we haven't done is solve for the human execution problem, and that's really where Hyper-brain is focused.
And I actually think it's fascinating in terms of like bringing back what used to be there before technology kind of made everything quicker. And I suppose then as a final question, and it's impossible to predict, so it's more of a what would you like to see or what do you think? I mean, well, where would you like to see the future? Where do you think we might be going with all of this?
I have, because Hyper-brain is not focused on replacement. We're not actively building fully automated bots today to take the activity away from a recruiter. But there are places where we see automation playing a very key role, and so we look to our partners to augment what we do and tie into what we do and leverage what we do. And one of the areas that I think is blowing my mind right now are some of the fully automated AI interview solutions that are coming to market. Not only do they have the ability to take information from, say, a Hyper-brain intake agenda and from a Hyper-brain role design and take our interview guide and execute that interview guide, the AI has the ability to determine on the fly whether or not the respondent has fully answered the question, and if not, continue to ask follow-up questions.
Wow.
To tease out that level of detail, and then to summarize that level of detail, not augment, not recreate, not put words in a candidate's mouth, but to summarize what was actually said in that process. And to be able to execute those interviews in 165 languages instantaneously with culturally sensitive translation is mind-blowing. It is mind-blowing, especially given that one of the biggest problems organizations say they have today is the overabundance of applicants they have per role. To put a high quality screening assessment that is role specific up front of that process, and to have that fully automated with minimal human involvement, so that the recruiters of the day are really dealing with the top 25, top 30 applicants for a role, and being allowed to deliver the human experience that we know humans will always be best at delivering in the interview process, I think is mind-blowing. So I do see the front part of the talent planning process becoming a little bit more asynchronous. I do see the screening portion becoming a little bit more asynchronous, and I see the opportunity for the talent acquisition, talent advisory function to deliver human service to their internal customers and a human experience to the external talent that they engage with at a high quality level. That's where we're headed.
Fantastic. Master, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks so much to Master for that brilliant conversation. Now back to the rest of the show.
I'm telling you, Matt is so good at interviewing. I think he's probably done 5,000 of them throughout his podcasting career, but great interview, actually. And Master Burnett, some great insights. And how about we close it off here? I think there's a ton of cool things that you need to check out on the purpleacornnetwork.com. Again, go to our LinkedIn page, follow us. We had some comments. So Matt disagrees or says that how good looking he is based on a matter of opinion. I'll just use my opinion and say I'm better looking, Jocelyn. So, but you don't have to chime in. Rona chimes in. My friend Bradley Clark, thanks for your comment on that session. And of course, Evan White was opening a bottle of beer for Points Pints. Jocelyn, it's really a pleasure to do this with you. I spent a lot of time with you last week, so it was great to come on a show, and it was an honor really to replace Matt and Rona on this week's episode.
Yep, it was fun. Good to see you, Serge.
Perfect. On that note, this is Serge and Jocelyn clocking out.